Hey, do you guys know what a sexy lamp is?
A sexy lamp?
A
Like
sexy lamp.
like what? Like an outside pole in lingerie?
Or oh, do you just mean like, like a leg, like a mannequin leg with fishnet on it or something?
Ooh,
Oh,
that
I've seen those.
right? It's from A Christmas Story, fragile.
Oh yeah.
But it actually means something in fiction too.
Absolutely. So, and that's gonna what we're gonna talk about today in our episode is objectification. So there is kind of this test in fiction. We'll call it a test, yeah, ladies. Where if you could replace your character, specifically your female character, with a sexy lamp, and your story doesn't really change, the narrative of your story doesn't change, maybe you should think about reworking that. But before we jump into objectification and how we handle it in fiction, and maybe it isn't always bad, Teresa, who are we?
We're the semi-sages of the pages. Welcome to this episode on objectification in fiction.
You're gonna learn the sexy lamp test, and we're not gonna objectify you. I'm Morgan.
This is Molly.
And I'm Teresa.
And
And as always, if you like our episodes, don't forget to like and subscribe.
Now, as we jump in, we realized when we were prepping for this episode that there's a lot of talk about what's objectification and what's stereotyping. So I'm going to talk a little bit about like what's the definition of objectification, and then I'm going to throw it to Morgan, who's going to talk a little bit about what stereotyping is, and then we're going to kind of jump into what we see in fiction and how that can influence us as authors. So objectification specifically is really it's the act of treating a person as if they are an object or a thing, right? They might not have feelings or emotions or rights. They only exist as like a tool or maybe a collection of body parts that are really just there in service of something else. Specifically,
wait, wait,
like,
wait, wait, wait.
yeah, yeah.
A collection of body parts.
Yeah, so I'm going to get to that because the biggest one people might talk about is sexual objectification, right? Which is really when you just treat a person as just the mere object of someone's sexual desire. It's not about them as a person, it's about what their body can do for somebody. And that's really it, right? It's not a character, it's not there. You don't treat a person as a person, you're treating that person as an object or a tool or a thing. Um and Morgan, what's the difference? Like what does stereotyping do for us?
Well,
Not
I
do
think
for
our
us, but what does
audience
that mean?
probably is really familiar with
They're
stereotypes.
smart. They're smart.
Yeah, so stereotypes, as you know, just for clarification, in case you need a little cleanly, like a little cleanup or something. Stereotype is when groups of people, usually there's perceptions of them or words about them that are labels that are attached to them that are usually pejorative or negative in nature. And it causes people to dismiss them as fully human. And those stereotypes can start out really innocent. Like, I love the movie Grease from all those years ago because it plays off of stereotypes, right? So you have the T-birds and the jocks, and you have the different like high school classes of stereotypes. But what happens with stereotypes is they can quickly turn highly toxic when the stereotypes are used to deny someone their humanity. And we see that in cases of genocide, in cases of totalitarian dictatorships where they come through and strip people of their humanity. And then that leads to objectification, which is why it's so important for us to talk about it in literature. Because if we are perpetuating the movement of stereotypes to objectification versus stereotypes to looking at the lens of humanity, then we become participants in what that means to objectify. So we want to, as authors and creators, look at objectification and make sure that we're treating it with the respect and the intentionality, as my friend Teresa always says, that I think the topic deserves.
So that's not to say that you can't use objectification or stereotypes in your fiction. It can actually be very powerful to do that, as long as you're intentional about it. So how would you know if you're using objectification so that you know when to use it appropriately?
I think that is a really important question and a really important thing to keep in mind. And we have some examples of kind of tests we can do for ourselves when we're looking at our work or that we can apply to other works. So we talked about the sexy lamp test. That's one thing. And while it started with, replacing a female character, really you could do it with a male character too, right? Or any sort of character of whatever minority or nationality or whatever it might be if you're worried that you're maybe objectifying the character and not treating them as a full character. Another one that is really famous is the Bechdel test. People might know that one. That also started as like a feminine commentary about movies where to pass the Bechdel test, right? There's three criterias. There has to be more than one woman in in the film. Those two women have to talk to each other, and they have to talk to each other ab about something that is not a man.
Would James Austen
Yeah, because the sisters talk about, their family.
Hmm.
But you bring up another really great point, which is just because a piece of media passes or fails the Bechdel test doesn't necessarily mean that it's good or bad. Doesn't necessarily mean that it's feminist or not feminist, or that's like a very low bar, but might not even make sense in all contexts, right? Lord of the Rings might not pass the Bechdel
You
test.
know what might not pass?
One might not pass.
The mother of horror. I'm not sure Frankenstein passes that test. If you think back, there are women, but they're always surrounded by men. And so, like, I can't think of a scene in that novel where two women would be talking to each other and live
There's
Mary
okay.
Shelley, right? Oh, sorry.
Yeah. No, no, you're fine. I was going to say there's very few women in that though.
I think there's only three.
So,
S- So there became a new test actually, which actually came out of Pacific Rim. So if you're a Pacific Rim fan, it fails the Bechdel test. There's only really one main female character, but that female character is really interesting and has a very strong arc and stuff like that. So that came up, kind of the new test you might want to call it is the Mako Mori test. That's the main character in Pacific Rim. And that has also three criteria. So for that one is there has to be at least one prominent female character who has her own narrative arc, and that narrative arc doesn't support a man's story.
and circling back, the reason that these tests exist is because there has been a problem, especially in visual media, with objectification of women. Not so much, I feel like, in recent fiction, but there was in the past as well. So these tests were developed, honestly, I think a lark in a lot of ways, as women looked to say, these characters don't represent me. And I think we can do better.
Yeah. And I think, we can use them and we can understand why these like criteria or kind of like social tests exist, but that doesn't mean we have to only apply them to women, right? If we see a story
Hmm.
where there's a lot of women characters and only one male character, we could apply this test as well, right? If we see a character or a story where every character is one ethnicity except for one character that's a different ethnicity, maybe we should be applying this test as well. Um, like that's different ways you can adapt it and learn. And it can help us see, like you were talking about earlier, Teresa, just because there's objectification, like doesn't necessarily mean it's unintentional or bad. And I think, Morgan, you have like a great classic example here.
Yeah, it, and this would be specifically again about objectification of women. So it's specific to that. But Of Mice and Men, the famous Steinbeck novel, he there's like two types of objectification that happen in that book. For those of you who haven't seen it or read it for a long time, you'll remember that the main character has some challenges. And so it follows him and his buddy, and they end up at a farm. And the man in charge of the farm is named Curly, and he has a wife, and they never name the wife. And the wife ends up, being provocative towards multiple men. This is very sexy lamp, kind of characterization. And in the end, she lives and dies. Spoiler alert. And her name is never given. And she's just going to get a new wife or whatever. She's very replaceable because her only purpose is to fulfill this, the place of a sexual object and to be looked at by the men or to be jealous by her husband. And so I think Of Mice and Men is kind of the quintessential book where he uses her objectification to bring attention to the fact that women in the time and the era are objectified and that this is a problem. And so he uses the character in a way that actually hangs a hat on and takes it to an extreme so that it causes us to have a dialogue about why is that happening? Should it be happening? And interestingly enough, she's like one of the only women, I think the only woman in the novel, and she gets a lot of page time. So it's not like she's ignored as a character. She's part of the action. She pushes the plot points, right? So she's critical to the arc of the story. And this is, I think, what Teresa was talking about earlier. She was talking about you can use intentionality and use objectification to drive deeper points about the social and cultural issues of the time and actually lead us to a better society. And I think, for me as an author, I'm always looking for other authors who do that. I'm always hoping to do it in my own work, to ask, make comments about what's wrong with the world we're living in and how can we make a better one.
And I think good fiction really mirrors what's going on in society and gives us a chance to explore that in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I would say, like, just because, like, let's take violence, for example. Violence is bad, but that doesn't mean we never see violence in books, right? It doesn't mean that it is bad to have violence in books because it can reflect a lot of what's going on in our world. It can drive a deeper point, exactly like what you're saying. Just because, like, objectification isn't good doesn't mean it shouldn't be included. We're artists. We're doing works of art. It's important to shine a spotlight even where it might be uncomfortable.
Well, it's
And
also part of human. Oh, sorry, Teresa.
No, you're fine. You're fine. Keep going.
It's also part of human nature, like what Teresa was saying. So it's what we observe. Objectification is part of our lived reality.
Mm-hmm. And it can be a really powerful way to show, especially if you're in a first person or a tight third person, it can be a really valuable way to show what that character thinks of other people. So with that character is objectifying others, that can be very powerful as well and tells you a lot.
We see it a lot with villain characters. That the
Mm-hmm.
way an author establishes a person as a villain is that the villain themselves objectifies them. And I mean, J.K. Rowling does this so well with Voldemort and his objectification of the Muggles. And it's classic. We see it in all types of texts. But it works still. It's effective because when we see characters objectifying full groups of people for any reason, whether they're non-magical or they're getting older or they're a specific race or they have a disability, which I think I really like fiction that deals with objectification of disabled and the elderly, because I think that's a community that isn't always spoken about, where I feel like women, because we make up 51% of the population and we're becoming more and more of a force as writers and as readers in our genres, I think there's more of an impetus to reverse some of the objectification in the past,
Uh-huh.
where I worry that that's not necessarily happening with other groups of people.
The
I think
good points. Yeah, that's definitely something to reflect upon.
And I think you're absolutely right. We think about the objectification of women because it's historically happened, because we're becoming more aware of it. That's why some of these tests like Bechdel or, you know, the sexy lamp or stuff like that exists. But again, you're absolutely right. We need to be thinking beyond that. You know, you can objectify, and I think of also classism here, like
Mm-hmm.
objectifying lower class, certain workers. We see this in real life, the objectification of people in different professions. And it's important to remember everyone is a human. Everyone has feelings, even um, you know, uh, people who maybe are criminals, right? They still have feelings and rights and emotions and desires and families, and they're fully human. They're not just dehumanized, right? They're not just objects. And that's important in our
So
writing. Go ahead, Morgan.
it reminds me of they did a study where they took people who were housing insecure. Back in my day, we called them homeless, but they don't use that term anymore. And they literally had family members like pose as homeless people, basically. And people would walk to work and wouldn't even stop to realize it was like their sister who was asking for help or their husband. And sometimes they'd walk by them 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 times a day. And these are good people. But because we get so programmed into our schedule and what we need to do, and also because the need is so great in our world, I think we get tapped out. There's another side to why we objectify, and it's not that we're villains, but it's that the need to be seen is so high, and there's so many people, and there's just us, and we have our lives to live too, that I think balancing that can be really tricky. And so this idea that Superman can go save every person and Santa Claus never misses a house, there's a huge gap between our heroes and what we are able to live in at like our daily life.
Yeah, and empathy fatigue.
Mm-hmm. That's
We
a
can
good word.
we can only care about so much. We can only care about so much. We can only care about so many people. We can't save everyone, like you said, Morgan.
Oh, I love that as a book. I'm hoping there's an author out there being like, oh, I'm writing about empathy fatigue right now, or that's such a great idea. I was trying to figure out what to do with my side character, and I'm going to add empathy fatigue. And if that's you, add a comment below because I want to know what you're doing with it.
And
Yeah.
since we're talking about comments, I'm also going to say, if you haven't already, like and subscribe. It really does make a big difference for us.
And let us know, what book have we missed that really plays with the theme of objectification? They're doing it intentionally to try to prove some sort of point or make you think or whatever. Or you can comment below on a book you think maybe accidentally doesn't do it so well. Maybe objectifies and they didn't mean to. So let us know down below. We'd love to, pick up new reads, new watches, or, maybe things we can learn from.
All right, so I think that's it for today. If they'd like to know more about the semi-sages of the pages, where can they go, Morgan?
They can go to our Discord, Semi-Sages of the Pages. They can go to semisagesofthepages.com and check out our amazing website. They can also visit us right here on YouTube, of course, because we have lots of fun stuff out. And if you have a picture of a sexy lamp, we need to see it. So jump on Discord and show it to us.
Love to
But
see
not too
that.
sexy.
Yes.
Lots of sexy.
I mean,
All
like,
right.
dial your sexiness.
Take care, everyone. Bye now.
Take care.